The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was taken, and the air felt thick with murmurs and anticipation. It wasn't every day that the city's most powerful man, Mayor Richard Langston, stood trial. Langston sat at the defendant's table, leaning back like he was in a boardroom instead of a courthouse. His suit was expensive, his hair slicked back, and that trademark smirk curled on his lips. To him, this wasn't a real trial. It was a performance. And he was the star. At the other table stood the young lawyer, Ethan Cole. Barely 27, fresh out of law school, no big firm backing him, no political allies, just a case file, a sharp mind, and a cause. Ethan wasn't just another attorney. He had a mission. Judge Miriam Calloway adjusted her glasses and sighed, clearly unimpressed with the circus-like atmosphere. She tapped her gavel lightly. "Mr. Cole, the floor is yours." Ethan stepped forward, his grip tightening on the folder in his hands. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on him. Langston watched him like a hawk sizing up a mouse, then let out a chuckle. "Before we start, Your Honor," Langston said, his voice dripping with amusement, "I just want to say how refreshing it is to see such young talent in the legal field. Really, it's adorable." The courtroom chuckled. The bailiff smirked. Even the prosecutor shook his head. Ethan didn't react. Langston tilted his head. "No comeback, kid." Ethan simply flipped open his folder. Then, he looked the mayor in the eye. "Mr. Langston, just to confirm, you're maintaining that you've never misused city funds, never taken bribes, never forged documents." Langston's smirk widened. "That's right. This is nothing but a political stunt. A complete waste of time." Ethan gave a small nod. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, the original financial records of the mayor's office, and alongside it, Exhibit B, the real records." Silence. Langston's smirk faltered. The audience shifted. Judge Calloway leaned forward. "Explain." Ethan held up two sets of documents. One was pristine, official, the one Langston's office had submitted. The other had red pen marks circling transactions that shouldn't exist. Langston adjusted his tie. Ethan walked slowly toward the judge's bench. "The document on the left is what Mayor Langston's office claims is the official city ledger. The one on the right, however, was retrieved from the server backups of the city treasury. These transactions, they don't match." The courtroom exploded into whispers. Judge Calloway frowned and turned to Langston. "Mr. Langston, do you have an explanation?" Langston forced a chuckle, but this time, the confidence in his voice wavered. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. This is a fabrication, an attempt to slander my name." Ethan stepped closer. "Then let's talk about that, Mr. Langston. Because the discrepancy involves $4.8 million in taxpayer funds that somehow disappeared, and I think I know where it went." The courtroom fell silent again. Langston stopped smirking. Because for the first time in his career, someone wasn't afraid to fight back. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. $4.8 million. The number hung in the air like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. Mayor Langston's smirk had vanished. His fingers twitched against the polished wood of the defense table. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering something quickly. Ethan noticed. Judge Calloway tapped her gavel. "Order in the court." She turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, explain what you mean by knowing where the money went." Ethan exhaled slowly. This was the moment, the one he had been preparing for, the one that could either crumble Langston's empire or crush Ethan completely. "Your Honor," Ethan began, stepping toward the jury. "The missing funds didn't just disappear, they were redirected, stashed away under false invoices, hidden in shell accounts under fake company names. It was a slow, careful siphoning of public money." Langston leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control. "That's a bold claim, son," he said, forcing a chuckle. "You're basically accusing me of a felony in front of half the city." Ethan turned to him. His voice was calm, measured. "I'm not accusing you of anything, Mr. Langston. The paperwork is—" Langston's jaw tightened. Ethan walked back to the evidence table, flipping through another document. He picked up a printout of a wire transfer. Your Honor, this is Exhibit C, a financial transaction from a city development fund to a consulting firm called Urban Strategies LLC. A total transfer of $1.2 million. Judge Calloway frowned. And what does this prove? Ethan turned to Langston's lawyer, a veteran defense attorney named Jonathan Grayson. Mr. Grayson, you're an experienced attorney. I assume you did your due diligence on your client's finances? Grayson gave a slow nod. Of course. Ethan's lips curled slightly. Then can you explain why Urban Strategies LLC doesn't exist? Another ripple of gasps through the courtroom. Langston's fingers clenched into a fist. Ethan dropped another file onto the table. We ran a check through the Secretary of State's business registry. There's no listing for Urban Strategies LLC, no employees, no tax ID, no office, nothing. Just a name, and a bank account that received over $1 million in public funds. Judge Calloway's eyes narrowed. Mr. Langston, do you have a response to this? Langston opened his mouth, closed it. His lawyer rushed to speak first. Your Honor, there are plenty of companies that operate under different registrations. Ethan cut him off. Right. And if this was a real company, then surely someone would have signed for the money. A CEO, a manager, someone. Ethan reached into his folder again, pulling out another document. But instead we found this. He held it up. A signature, scribbled at the bottom of the transaction. Judge Calloway squinted. Whose signature is that? Ethan's eyes locked on Langston. Mayor Richard Langston's. The mayor's face drained of color. The room erupted. Judge Calloway pounded her gavel. Order! Order! Langston's lawyer leaned over and whispered fiercely in his ear. The mayor was sweating now. His confidence had taken a direct hit. Ethan wasn't finished. Your Honor, we're just getting started, he said, stepping closer to the jury. Because this is only one transaction, and there are dozens more. Langston's smirk was gone. Now, there was only panic. The courtroom was alive with energy. Whispers, murmurs, stolen glances. Everyone had come expecting a routine trial, one that would end in Mayor Langston laughing his way out of the courthouse. But now? Now, the mayor wasn't laughing. Judge Calloway adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. Mr. Langston, this is a serious allegation. Your signature appears on a financial transfer to an organization that doesn't exist. I suggest you take this very seriously. Langston shifted in his seat. His cheeks flushed red. His lawyer, Grayson, cleared his throat. Your Honor, I'd like to request an adjournment to properly review these. Ethan didn't let him finish. With all due respect, Your Honor, the defense had weeks to review this evidence, he interjected. If they didn't find it, it's because they didn't look. Grayson's jaw clenched. Mr. Cole, this is highly irregular. Ethan turned to the judge. What's irregular is how the mayor's personal bank account received a deposit just 3 days after the Urban Strategies transfer. A deposit of $500,000. Judge Calloway's eyes snapped toward him. Explain. Ethan reached for another set of documents. He took his time, letting the weight of the moment settle. This is Exhibit D, a direct deposit from Urban Strategies LLC, the fake company, into a personal account. He lifted the page. The account belongs to... He turned to the jury. Mayor Richard Langston. Gasps filled the air. Shock, disbelief. Langston shot up from his seat. Enough of this. His voice boomed across the room. Ethan simply stared him down. Sit down, Mr. Langston, Judge Calloway ordered, her voice sharp. The mayor hesitated, his breathing heavy. His hands gripped the edge of the table. You're being set up, Langston muttered, shaking his head. This is all a trick, a smear campaign by my political enemies. Ethan tilted his head. Interesting. So are you saying that this isn't your bank account? That the deposit never happened? Langston's eyes flickered. That's not what I said. Ethan took a step forward. his voice steady, controlled. Then prove it. Right here, right now. Give the court access to your financial records. If you're innocent, then you have nothing to hide. Langston froze. The mayor's lawyer interjected quickly. My client is under no obligation to. Ethan held up a hand. Understood. He doesn't have to. But his refusal will be noted. A slow shift rippled through the courtroom. The jury exchanged glances. They weren't just listening now. They were doubting. Judge Calloway leaned forward, her fingers tapping against the bench. Mr. Langston, if you have a legitimate defense, I suggest you present it now. Langston's hands balled into fists. His mind raced. He was cornered. Every instinct told him to deny, to deflect. But the eyes of the jury, the reporters in the gallery, the judge herself, they were all watching, waiting. And for the first time in his career, he had no way out. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, the walls closing in, the weight of the evidence crushing down on Mayor Langston. His once confident smirk had vanished. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk. Judge Calloway let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. Mr. Langston, she said, her voice firm, the prosecution has presented substantial evidence suggesting financial misconduct. Do you wish to respond? Langston licked his lips. He glanced at his lawyer, then back at the judge. Your Honor, this is all circumstantial. A simple accounting error at best, and an outright political attack at worst. Ethan's eyes narrowed. A simple accounting error? He let out a small chuckle. $4.8 million accidentally funneled through fake companies and personal accounts? That's quite the error, Mr. Langston. Langston's lawyer quickly stepped in. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence, and unless the prosecution has further evidence, we see no reason to continue this charade. Ethan's lips curled into a slight smile. Oh, don't worry, Mr. Grayson, he said. We're just getting started. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, the prosecution calls its next witness. The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, and in walked Victoria Alden. Langston's eyes went wide. His grip tightened on the table, because he knew exactly who she was. The moment she stepped forward, the murmurs in the courtroom exploded. Reporters whispered, heads turned, and even Judge Calloway raised an eyebrow. Victoria Alden, former chief financial officer of City Hall, and Langston's right-hand woman for the last 10 years. Judge Calloway gestured to the bailiff. Please swear in the witness. Victoria approached the stand, her expression unreadable. She raised her right hand, took the oath, then slowly sat down. Langston shifted in his seat. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, What the hell is she doing here? Ethan cleared his throat. Ms. Alden, can you please state your former position for the court? She adjusted the microphone. I was the chief financial officer for the city of Brookdale for the past 11 years, she said, her voice calm and precise. I oversaw all major transactions, grants, and municipal expenditures. Ethan nodded. And you worked closely with Mayor Langston? Every single day, she confirmed. Did you have access to the city's financial records? Yes, I had full clearance. Ethan stepped closer. His voice lowered slightly. Ms. Alden, do you know where the missing $4.8 million went? Langston bolted upright. Objection! His lawyer shot up from his seat. Your Honor, the prosecution is clearly leading the witness. Judge Calloway barely glanced at him. Overruled. She turned to Victoria. Answer the question. Victoria hesitated. Her fingers curled around the edges of the witness stand. She took a slow, deep breath. Then, she looked at Langston, and for the first time he looked scared. Yes, she said finally. I know exactly where the money went. The entire courtroom gasped. Langston's lawyer looked like he'd just been punched in the gut. Ethan took a step closer. And can you tell the court? Victoria exhaled. Then, in a voice that was clear as glass, she said, It was laundered through multiple fake companies, and then funneled into offshore accounts. Some of it went toward paying off political allies, some of it into personal real estate, and the rest. She paused, turning her gaze to the defense table. The rest went directly into Mayor Richard Langston's campaign fund. Silence. Then, boom. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouting, the sound of reporters scrambling for their phones. Judge Calloway slammed her gavel. Order! Order in the court! Ethan turned to Langston. The mayor was staring at Victoria, his face pale, jaw clenched. She's lying, he muttered under his breath. This is a goddamn setup. Ethan's voice cut through the noise. Ms. Alden, do you have proof of these transactions? Victoria didn't hesitate. Yes, I kept copies of everything. Bank statements, wire transfers, internal emails. I submitted them to the court last night. Langston's lawyer's face turned white. Judge Calloway slowly turned toward the mayor. Mr. Langston, she said, her voice dangerously calm. Do you still maintain your innocence? Langston didn't respond, because now he had nothing left to say. The courtroom was in chaos. Reporters whispered furiously. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. And at the center of it all, Mayor Richard Langston sat frozen. Judge Calloway's voice cut through the noise. Mr. Langston, I'll ask you again. Do you still maintain your innocence? Langston's fingers dug into the table. His jaw clenched. His entire world was unraveling in front of him. Ethan stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like a predator circling its prey. Mr. Langston, you said earlier that this was a political stunt, that the evidence was fabricated. He gestured toward Victoria Alden. Are you saying that your own former chief financial officer is lying under oath? Langston's teeth gritted. This is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Ethan's eyebrows lifted. $4.8 million stolen, laundered through fake companies, deposited into offshore accounts, and that's just the money we know about. Langston's lawyer, Jonathan Grayson, stood up. Your Honor, I move to dismiss these accusations on the grounds that... Judge Calloway raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Grayson. Grayson froze. The judge turned back to Langston. This is your last chance, Mr. Langston, she said, her voice sharp. Tell the truth or prepare to face the consequences. Langston's throat bobbed. He looked around the courtroom, the jurors watching him with disbelief, the reporters documenting his every move, his own attorney silent beside him. And then, for the first time, he realized he had no escape. The mayor leaned forward, gripping the table like a drowning man clinging to a lifeboat. Your Honor, I... A loud bang echoed through the room. All eyes turned toward the courtroom doors. A man in a dark suit had burst into the room, rushing toward the defense table. A government official. He whispered something into Langston's lawyer's ear. Grayson's face fell. Langston turned to him. What? What is it? Grayson swallowed hard. Then he slowly turned toward the judge. Your Honor, my client would like to change his plea. Gasps exploded from the gallery. Ethan's heart pounded. Judge Calloway leaned forward. Is that so, Mr. Langston? Langston looked sick. His lips pressed together. His hands trembled. Finally, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he said, Guilty. Boom. The courtroom erupted. Shouts, murmurs, the sound of reporters racing for their phones. Judge Calloway pounded her gavel. Order! Order in the court! Langston sat completely still, the weight of his own downfall pressing against him like a ton of bricks. Ethan took a slow breath. He had done it. He had taken down the most powerful man in the city. And yet, there was still one thing left to do. Ethan turned toward the judge. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented today, I move that Richard Langston be immediately taken into custody pending further investigation. Judge Calloway nodded without hesitation. She turned to the bailiff. Take him into custody. Two officers approached the defense table. Langston's head snapped up. Wait, no, Stand up, Mr. Langston. one of the officers said. Langston's chair scraped against the floor as he was pulled to his feet. Ethan watched as the once untouchable mayor was placed in handcuffs, the final nail in the coffin. As the officers led him toward the exit, Langston suddenly turned to Ethan, his face twisted with anger. "You think this makes you a hero?" he sneered. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Ethan held his gaze. "We'll see," he said. Langston was dragged from the courtroom. The gallery exploded into applause. Judge Calloway sighed. "Court is adjourned." She banged her gavel one last time. Ethan finally let out a breath. It was over. Or at least, this part was. Because if Langston's last words were true, then the corruption went deeper than anyone realized. And Ethan? He was just getting started. The courtroom emptied in waves. Reporters rushed out first, eager to break the story. Then the murmuring crowd, whispering about what they had just witnessed, some shaking their heads, others in awe. But Ethan Cole just stood there. For months, he had imagined this moment, the day Richard Langston fell, the day justice was served. But something felt unfinished. The judge had left. The jury had filed out. Even Langston's lawyer had disappeared, probably off to draft an appeal. But one person remained, Victoria Alden. She stood by the witness stand, arms crossed, watching him. There was something in her expression, respect, but also something else. Ethan walked over. "I appreciate what you did today." Victoria exhaled sharply. "You don't have to thank me. I should have come forward years ago." Ethan studied her. "So why didn't you?" She hesitated, then looked down. "Because I was scared." Ethan didn't respond. He understood. "Langston wasn't just a mayor," she said. "He was a kingmaker. He had people everywhere. The police, the city council, even some of the judges. You don't just take down a man like that and walk away unscathed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "But you did it anyway." She finally met his eyes. "Yeah, because someone had to." A long silence stretched between them.
Then, she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Ethan frowned. "What's that?" Victoria placed it in his hand. "Proof that Langston wasn't lying," she said. "The corruption goes deeper than him." Ethan stared at the flash drive. His mind was already racing. "How bad is it?" he asked. Victoria's lips pressed together. "You have no idea." Ethan turned the drive over in his fingers. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have. He had won today. But the fight? The fight was just beginning. Victoria stepped back. "You're going to need help." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." And as he watched her leave, he realized something. This wasn't just about Langston. This was about all of them. The next battle was already waiting in the shadows. And this time, he was ready.